I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
Welcome to another episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. Today we're going to start with what might be the most important storyline surrounding Oklahoma football as spring practice approaches. Here's the hot take to open up this episode. 2026 is the ultimate no excuses year for Brent Venables. Not a transition year, not a roster rebuild, not a give the staff time to develop their players year. Those narratives are gone. For the first time since Venables arrived in Norman, the program is officially standing at the moment where the process is supposed to produce results. And when you start looking at the numbers, the roster structure and the staff investments, it becomes pretty clear why expectations around Oklahoma football are about to change dramatically, because the Sooners finally took the necessary steps in 2025 to look like a finished product. Yeah, and look, you go back for the past few seasons, the conversation around Oklahoma football has always included some version of the same explanation. The roster needed to be rebuilt and the culture needed to be reset and the defense needed time to learn the complicated system. And those were legitimate explanations early in the Venables era, but they don't apply right now. They don't apply anymore. This year, 2026, Oklahoma returns 14 starters. That's going to put them among the national leaders in roster continuity. And in the modern era of college football, the transfer portal era, the NIL era, the early NFL declaration era, that kind of retention, it is incredibly rare. Programs lose veterans every offseason. Oklahoma, they kept their key guys. And that's where I think this story gets interesting, because some of the players who returned, they absolutely had other options. Look at Isaiah Satania. He had legitimate NFL buzz. Kip Lewis, he could have explored the draft. Instead, what do? They come back. And that's a decision that matters. When veteran players choose to stay in college football today, particularly at the same university, it's rarely accidental. It usually means they believe something meaningful is building inside the program. That belief sends a message to the locker room. It reinforces the culture that Venables has been preaching since the day he arrived. And look, for years, that phrase has been, part of the slogan, part of the promise, the gold standard. It's starting to look like something players are actually believing in. Because when your best players voluntarily delay the NFL to chase something bigger together, that's not rebuilding a roster. That's a roster that thinks it can win. And another major reason you got to look at for no excuses to have that conversation right now, and it comes down to one position, and that's the quarterback, specifically John Mateer. You look at veteran quarterback stability. It might be the single most important ingredient in championship runs in college football. And Oklahoma has it. Last season, John Mateer quietly put together an impressive stat line. He threw for almost 2,900 yards, 14 touchdowns, while also leading the team with 8 rushing touchdowns. So that dual threat ability, it turned him into the engine of the offense. But what makes Mateer even more valuable in 2026 is going to be his experience. He's already played through an entire SEC schedule. He's in year 4 with Ben Arbuckle. He's played in the college football playoff. So he's seen what elite defense looks like. That kind of experience, it eliminates a huge variable that has haunted Oklahoma in previous seasons. And that's been this massive quarterback learning curve. You went from one quarterback to the next, to the next, and you've not had a quarterback come back. This is crazy. You've not had a quarterback come back to Oklahoma since Deland Gabriel. You've not had a quarterback complete his year, his career at Oklahoma since Jalen Hurts. So there's been learning curve after learning curve after learning curve with Oklahoma and quarterbacks. And you don't have that this year. And when you combine Mateer's leadership with returning receivers like Isaiah Satania, and then you add Terrell Harris, the Virginia transfer who adds size and physicality to that receiver room, suddenly this offense has both the pilot and the weapons to operate at a high level. But the roster stability, it's only a part of the story here because the staff around this team has obviously seen its fair share of changes. And one of the more fascinating developments of this offseason was the investment, the type of investment that Oklahoma made in its coaching staff. So they didn't just go out and hire assistants. They went out and they hired heavy hitters. And one of the more notable additions to the staff is Deland McCullough, the running backs coach. He came from the Las Vegas Raiders. And he's got a contract somewhere around $625,000, which immediately tells you how serious this program is about the hire. This wasn't about filling a vacancy. This was about sending a message. For years, one lingering question around Venables and this era at Oklahoma has been whether the Sooners could consistently develop elite NFL talent at the running back position. Now you're bringing in a coach with recent NFL experience, and that answers that question in a very direct way. It also sends a message out to recruits. You don't have to leave college football to get coached by people who understand the professional game. And McCullough wasn't the only high-profile addition. Obviously, they bring in LaMar Morgan from Michigan to coach cornerbacks. And he arrives with national championship experience, and his contract could eventually reach over $1 million by 2027. That level of investment tells you something important, that Oklahoma believes this roster is ready to win and win right now. Because when you build a coaching staff with that kind of experience and salary structure, you're not building for 3 years down the road. You're building for the right here, for the right now. But there's one more ingredient here that might define this season more than any statistic or roster number. And that's the emotional scar from last year. The 2025 college football playoff loss to Alabama. I mean, look, we remember that game. They remember that game. I mean, Oklahoma comes out flying. They built that 17-0 lead. The stadium was electric. Everything felt like it was tilting towards a statement victory. And then everything flipped. Momentum flipped. Alabama storms back. They outscore Oklahoma 34-7 the rest of the way are obviously earning the victory and moving on to face Indiana in that second round. So that's the kind of loss that sticks. It sticks in the locker room. It sticks in the mind of players. It sticks with the coaching staff. It doesn't fade away. Spring ball does not get that taste out of your mouth. It becomes a part of the identity of the next season. And the important thing about the 2026 roster is that most of the players who experienced that collapse, they're still here. They remember the fourth quarter. They remember the missed opportunities. They remember how close they were to something even bigger. In many ways, that kind of heartbreak can become a powerful motivator. Championship teams often carry some kind of emotional fuel. For this Oklahoma roster, the fuel might be that night against Alabama. Because Oklahoma plays in a conference where motivation absolutely matters. The schedule is brutal. The physical toll is enormous. And the teams that survive it usually have something deeper driving them. And when you combine everything together, the returning starters, the veteran quarterback, the upgraded coaching staff, and we didn't even talk about Jason Witten, and then you add the emotional motivation from last year, the picture becomes pretty clear. Oklahoma has officially moved past the rebuilding stage. This is the roster that Brent Venables spent 4 years building. These are the players who are experienced. He has the guys in the positions that he wants them to be with a level of experience he desires them to have. The defense understands the scheme. The offense understands leadership. And you've got a recruiting pipeline behind them that's already producing elite talent. At some point, The process has to produce results. And that's why the expectations in Norman are going to change. Because when a team has 14 returning starters, a playoff tested quarterback, and one of the most expensive assistant coaching staffs in the conference, that standard begins to shift. The conversation stops being about patience. It starts being about performance. So here's the bottom line. This Oklahoma team has the talent. It has the experience, it has the coaching, and it has the emotional motivation of a playoff collapse that still stings. That combination does not look like a rebuilding program. It looks like a program ready to compete for a championship. And that's the reason why 2026 feels like the pivot point for Brent Venables, for his legacy here. If Oklahoma makes a deep run in a college football playoff, the narrative becomes really simple. The rebuild has worked. But if Oklahoma falls short again, the conversation, it's going to change. Suddenly, it's no longer about trusting the process. It's going to be a very more difficult conversation, a much tougher conversation. It's going to be centered around, why aren't they finishing the job? This is the Sooner Nation podcast. Thanks for hanging with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Sooner Nation podcast. If you listened to that first segment, we spent some time breaking down Oklahoma football and why 2026 might be the no excuses year for Brent Venables. Now, though, we're going to shift over to, I think, something that's just as fascinating in Norman, Oklahoma softball. More specifically, the version of this team that's about to make its debut in the SEC for the 2026 season. Here's my take. This Oklahoma Sooners version may be the most lopsided juggernaut of the entire Patty Gasso era. And that's saying something when you consider the teams that this program has fielded over the last decade. But this year's roster has a very different profile than the dominant championship teams that we've seen before, because the 2026 Sooners, they're not just built to suffocate opponents. They are built to obliterate them using these bats and the offense that's there. And that means that their SEC season, which starts on Friday, might look very different from what fans have gotten used to in Norman. Instead of the blowouts built on pitching dominance and airtight defense, this could be the year Oklahoma wins games in this conference 10-8, 9-7, 12-6. In other words, the Sooners may have entered their shootout era of college softball. Let me tell you what I mean. Let me explain this to you. Let's start with the part that makes the team truly terrifying, which is the offense. Right now, the numbers, they almost look fake. Oklahoma reached 100 home runs faster than any team in NCAA history. They hit that milestone in just 25 games. Now, that's a talking point that's been around for over a week now, it feels like. But again, for context here, let's think about that for a second. 25 games. The 2021 Oklahoma team, one of the greatest teams in softball history, they set the record with 161 home runs. This 2026 version, they're currently averaging 4 home runs per game. Played Tulsa in a midweek game on a Wednesday night. They hit 5. But they're averaging 4. If that pace holds across, let's say, a full 60-game season, this is a program that's going to finish with over 200 home runs. So that's not just breaking a record. That's just straight out obliterating it. And it's not coming from just one hitter either. This lineup is deep enough that pitchers don't get a break. There's no break anywhere in this order. You've got stars like Ella Parker, who has been playing like one of the most dangerous hitters in the country. You've got power coming from multiple spots in this lineup. And there's, one of the most fascinating storyline in all is the freshman. Think about Kendall Wells. When we're still early March, she's already got 17 home runs. She's driving an offense that has more than 100 home runs total, which is, by the way, this is crazy. They've got 34 more home runs than the next closest team. And freshmen are participating in this. They're just not supposed to arrive and immediately dominate like that. You have the occasional Jocelyn Alo, Tiare Jennings, Jada Coleman, but they are all in on one roster, that style of player. And Kendall Wells has stepped into the lineup and started putting up numbers that do invite comparisons to Alo. And that's about as big of a compliment as you can give a power hitter in Oklahoma softball. And you combine her productivity, Wells, with Parker's efficiency and the depth of this lineup, and suddenly you're looking at an offense that's not just good, it is like final boss level good. This lineup doesn't just beat pitchers, it breaks them. It breaks them mentally. You can throw a perfect game for 4 innings against Oklahoma, but you make one mistake, and suddenly you're down. That's the kind of offense, the type of pressure that travels even when you start conference play. But here's where things get interesting. Because while the offense may be historically great, there are some cracks. There are some cracks in this team. And there's a red flag when you look at the pitching. And look, I'm not going to jump on this like some people have on our social media page. By the way, this is where I get to shamelessly plug social media. We are rapidly approaching 18,000 followers on our Facebook page. Come check us out. Heartland Sports on Facebook. We even got a subscription content if you want to take a deeper dive into things that we're talking about. Get some stuff that's just not out there on our public page. It's all there. But free stuff, free conversation. It's there, almost 18,000 strong. And they're bagging on the pitching. I don't think it's as bad as what some people make it out to be. Obviously, I don't think it's as good as what some people make it out to be. And if you look at Oklahoma's pitching, you take a look at the stat sheet and you gander at it long enough, there is a number that starts jumping out immediately. And it's not a comfortable one. While Oklahoma leads the country in offensive power, they currently rank last in the conference in home runs allowed. Let me repeat that. The team that leads the nation in hitting home runs also sits at the bottom of the conference in preventing home runs. So to me, that's it. That's your red flag. In the Big 12, Oklahoma could get away with the occasional mistake pitch. If the Sooners gave up a solo home run, it didn't really matter because the offense was going to score 6 or 7 runs anyway. But we know this isn't the Big 12. This is a different world that Oklahoma lives in right now. And you've got teams like LSU and Alabama and Tennessee and Texas. And they're absolutely stacked with power hitters. And if you're giving up long balls in that environment, suddenly you're not playing from ahead anymore. You're playing from behind. Now, to be fair, there are bright spots in the pitching staff. Look at Audrey Lowry. She's been excellent. 1.83 ERA. She is anchoring this staff, and that was something that we really didn't see happening. But the overall staff numbers, they still rank middle of the pack in the conference. And historically, Patty Gasso's national championship teams usually feature a top 3 pitcher. They are usually one of the top 3 units in the conference. Right now, they're not there. They're not. And that's why I think we're about to see something we're not used to seeing with Oklahoma softball. We're about to see some high-scoring games. Now, there's another factor that could quietly influence this season as well, and it happened at the absolute worst possible time. You got the season-ending injury, ACL tear for Nelly Macaroni-Morenas. And losing her, you're not just losing a good player, you're losing a leader. She was hitting .492. She was one of the best defensive third basemen in the conference, and she brought a veteran presence to the infield. And you lose that kind of stability right before jumping into conference play, it creates some uncertainty. Now, look, players like Abby Dayton and others, they're capable of stepping in. They've proven that in the week that we've seen them play without Nelly. But also chemistry matters on the defensive side of the field. And when you're playing against elite SEC offenses, even small defensive lapses can turn into big innings. So between the pitching vulnerability and the defensive adjustment period, Sooners suddenly look a little more human than they did during the dynasty years. But here's the thing. Being more human doesn't mean they're not still the best team in the conference. If you were going to build a metaphor for this team, I think the best one might be this. Let's call it the glass cannon. A glass cannon is something capable of devastating power, but with vulnerabilities that can be exposed if the fight drags on long enough. And that's what Oklahoma looks like right now. The offensive they're capable of world record damage. But the pitching and the defense, they may occasionally allow opponents to hang around longer than what we're used to seeing. And that's going to change the vibe of some of the games. Instead of the classic Oklahoma formula, shut down pitching, early lead, run rule victory, we may start seeing something different. We might start seeing games that feel like heavyweight boxing matches, back and forth scoring. They're going to have momentum swings. Scoreboards are going to be lighting up. But even in that environment, there's still a reason I believe Oklahoma is going to win the SEC. Because when you have the hitters like Kendall Wells, like Ella Parker, like Gabby Garcia, just keep going down the list. Pick your favorite one. You only need one inning to completely flip a game with that type of offense. Ultimately, softball, like baseball, still comes down to one fundamental truth. Runs win games. And Oklahoma is scoring them at a pace that we've literally never seen before. They lead the nation 10 different offensive categories. Their batting averages sits right around 456 as a team, which is absurd as a team. Not one player, not 3 or 4 players, not your core, the team. And they're hitting home runs at a pace that could reset the NCAA record book. So yeah, there's vulnerabilities here. Yeah, the SEC is going to test this pitching staff. And yeah, there's going to be games where Oklahoma gives up more runs than what we're used to seeing. But if this offense keeps producing at anything close to this pace, it's probably not going to matter. Because the Sooners could simply outscore everyone anyway. So here's where I land on the 2026 Sooners as they begin conference play. They're not the invincible machine that we saw in 2023, 2024. They're not the shutdown pitching powerhouses that defined some of the championship teams of the past. But they may be something just as dangerous, a historic offense paired with just enough pitching to survive. A team capable of winning games 12-7 instead of 5-0. And that's a team that might bring a completely different style of softball to this conference. And if the names we talked about, Kendall Wells, Gabby Garcia, Ella Parker, Cassidy Pickering, if they maintain that anything that is just close to this current pace, the Sooners may not just win the conference, they might do it while rewriting the NCAA record book along the way. That's going to do it for this edition of the Sooner Nation podcast. Thanks so much for hanging with us. We really appreciate getting to know you guys. Make sure you find us. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. Find us online, heartland-sports.com. Find us on Facebook, Heartland Sports. Join our community. Be a part of what we're doing. Let us know your thoughts. Enjoy the softball this weekend. We'll be back to talk about it later on. Boomer Sooner.
But I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. When I'm walking, yes I know I'm gonna be the man who's working hard.